Project 9 Practice and Research. This is my sketchbook for Project 9 and it more or less continues from Project 8. Normally I do start a separate sketchbook, but this kind of seemed to flow of its own accord. So here we have my tutor feedback, which was a little bit more detailed for Project 8, and then my note making and bullet points and so forth of what I need to do for Project 9. Along the way, we discussed in the tutor feedback about re-editing, locating my practice, and this is going to be an ongoing journey. So I've started to work on new statements for this. This has kind of started to come together a little bit more since deciding that the direction of my work is going to be knit, and that kind of, it seems to fit in very well with my practice, knit and mixed media. So I shall continue to reflect and make new edits with locating my practice for 3.2 and 3.3. I've looked at other artists and their statements as a little bit of support, as we can see Laura Blake, and I also used Anne Macquarie, who's a weaver, and her statement, artist statement, was particularly interesting, so this has helped support this here. Through here, I think it's been important to keep documentation of emails and so forth. One thing that I like a sketchbook to have is a little bit of structure. I don't like bits of paper and notes, even though I do make bullet points and so forth, and planning with pieces of paper and so forth. I do like to put them in the sketchbook so that I'm keeping track on where I should be, and the timings and so forth. I think this is quite important. So this is kind of what I call all the housekeeping part of the assignment. Now through here I just started with some light mark making, and just played around with materials and so forth. It's kind of, now that I'm working with knit, I want to kind of introduce, you know, the feeling and notions of knit and stitch, and the way that the construction of the stitches coordinate in various patterns and so forth. But also as well, I think it's important to reflect this in drawing, and as we can see, I've just introduced some simple mark making and colour palettes and materials really that have been left over in my box of mixed media. Then what I had a little mini project was, you know, making translations and drawings of some knitted samples, but drawing them and painting them, and came back to the line of inquiry with the raised line of the paper. And then from these drawings and this note making, I then have started to translate into knit. So I knitted some square samples, and literally I haven't cast them off. I've just cut them and adhered them to paper, and then just played around with some hand stitching. It's nice because the knitwear is so textural, and again, it's all this visual quality that I like in my work. Moving forward, I proceeded to make some more knitted samples. Now, during the discussion with my tutor, it was decided in my feedback that it was kind of, don't start emphasising on any new sampling, but reflect on sampling that I've done. But on a positive note, I do think that this has been good, and I have produced a new set of samples. I just wanted to do it. It's just the way that my work moved forward, so I just went with the flow. Some of the sample making doesn't take that long for me, so I spent a few days, and what I've started to play around with in my sketchbook is introducing my materials. I wanted to start to use the rubber bands in the knit, overlay the foam boards that I've been working with, and then here just playing with more elastic and rubber bands, setting them into the knit. And the one good thing about sketchbook is you can just make it If it's successful, great. If it's not, then you can reflect on it as a learning curve. Quite like the idea of this offcut because it resonates with the circle. And again, I've just gone back to using some medium to, paint the flow of knitted stitches. These samples here do actually start to play with returning back to the Dyslexia Online store where I'd made textile responses with my lollipop sticks, and I've woven them into the knit. As you can see, these have become very textural, so this is something that I can come back to. Here I've continued with my French knitted cord, and I've changed the colour palette here. Still instigating with the thin red line, but now introducing colour palettes with the same technique, and then just making mini samples. Through here, this is where the new sampling begins. Through research, the stress relief noodles played a reflection on this response, and again mixing with my foam board. And these particular samples then moved forward, where I used the hand as a platform. I re-evaluated the hands and the body. I stopped using the mask and I stopped using the gloves because they were a distraction in Project 8. So these are now exploring the idea of play, movement and investigation. And again, mixing my materials and just playing, returning back to the circle in that sample. And then processing some new samples and note making and pushing the ideas of development. As we can see through here, I started to engage in photographs to record stage by stage of the exploration and investigation, pulling and twisting. As we can see, I've used returned back to the large scale samples and integrated this with a lot more knit, and you're just using the hand as a platform is really working well, and I think this is making a good starting point now. Then along the way, the use of the rubber bands. Now these samples were about the size of an A4, and then moving on and developing these ideas, I attached lollipop sticks. This is quite an interesting sample as they started to play with the idea of sound. So this is something that I'm going to start setting up and thinking about for 3.2, along with the body as a platform and making further investigations. So this is why I have engaged in making new samples for Project 9. You will see the full footage of these samples on video on my blog, and these are, recorded documentation of my ideas and so forth, and the processes that have gone to make these samples. Still reflected back onto the idea of the circles, and in tutor feedback it was addressed with colour, so I was having a little bit of fun really working with knit based, working with the getting to grips with the knitting, and then just making an attachment of foam, engaging with the circle. And then here we can see that I've brought back in the coloured overlay, and this can be used within the work. I think this is something that I can further investigations for 3.2, using this idea for colour changing, working with hues, with colour palettes, tones, so that still holds interest. And then what I've done is any extra notes and so forth, I've still continued to keep the photographic work and use this as my creative visual. Everything has to be so visual for me, so I still think this is an important factor within my project work. Through here I've started to look at how am I going to communicate my textiles. This is something that I want to further for project 10, I'm going to be looking at mood boards and Padlets. So with my photography work, it was advised by my tutor to keep everything simple. So because I had taken such a lot of photographs, etc., I now started to engage in refining, selecting and sorting photographic work for my projects and assignments. So pushing the work more forward and still continuing to work in the sketchbook, I've engaged on this page with my materials and colour palettes and just playing around with colour proportions. The photography again of the new refined samples is important, and just playing around with proportions of using the thread and combining. I think this would work, and this could be an introduction into the knit at some point, possibly in 3.2. But again, I think these ideas are still good to return to and come back to, maybe bring forward again for 3.2. Now, photographs through here, there is a lot of documentation of now where I've started to investigate further with the hand as a platform and to use the body. Each of the samples have a video which I've broken down on my blog, and also I started to engage and make an extension of using the arm and applying samples to find and discover how the arm could differ to the use of the hand, and a lot of note making and so forth. And then through here again, in preparation for project 10, I've started to put photographs together of various stages of the work that I'd done with the new samples. Again, these can be witnessed on the video footage on my blog pages. So I think that's quite important to actually see this. But these boards are preparing for 3.2. Again, this was discussed with my tutor, which is going to be interesting. I have also found out what could be in preparation for 3.2 with the learning outcomes and so forth. So I've been reading up on that. So as this is for project 9, this is my sketchbook. The fourth draft edit for the critical essay is at the moment still undergoing. There is still a lot of work to take place. As to whether I consider that it's a positive essay, I'm not too sure at the moment. I feel as though I've lost my way. I've used my tutor feedback to inform and to change and re-edit, but as it stands, I still I'm going to process through there. I need to reduce down the timing, and I need to reduce down some of the slides, but all in all, project 9 is started to conclude. I've started a new bibliography and in preparation with the Harvard referencing for the critique on this.